G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Torrin Minutillo from Attergy Coaching Services. He's based in Perth, Western Australia. Thanks for your time today, Torrin.
Thanks, Troy. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
Let's start with how we know each other. So we've started using a guest matching service for podcasts called Podmatch earlier this year, and you reached out, thought you might be a good guest for us.
Yeah, I think it's about 3 or 4 months myself now that I've been on that platform, and it's been good to be able to meet some new people and talk about what I'm doing. And I've found it really interesting, and also a good way to articulate your own message in a concise manner, and also really just to help some people sort of pick up some tips potentially along the way that might help them on their journey, which is really why I do it.
Right, that's perfect. That's what the podcast is here for. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
So right at the moment, my focus, or the majority of my focus, is on building a business coaching business, particularly focused on business owners that have organisations between 10 and 50 people. My focus, my specialty, and my expertise is around human behaviour, and those types of businesses generally have people problems. And that's where I like to help. And at the core of most businesses' growth, people are involved, and the bigger they get, and then help business leaders through personal leadership figure out where they should be focusing their time and energy as the business grows, because I see that's one of the biggest challenges. So, and apart from that, I've got a real estate company as well, which I've been involved in for 2007. I started that, and I've been in the real estate game since 2000. And then prior to that, had back to 1989.
Right. Okay. And maybe tell us a bit more. So the real estate business is like, is it rentals? Is it, or is it?
So our focus is commercial and industrial property, but we've got a property development part of it, which we have done for a long time. Myself and my brother. When I say we, I've got a brother who's a partner in the business. But we do property management, sales and leasing. We do a little bit of residential, and we've got a bit of residential management, but the focus is more the industrial space. And We've been developing that type of property now for 15 odd years. So we've grown a management portfolio out of the clients that we've built up along the way.
And is it just around Perth or other parts of Western Australia, or broader?
No, just the metropolitan Perth region, particularly in the southern suburbs, because that's where we're based.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Well, you would have done very well if you got into that game in 2007. There was phenomenal growth, obviously, with the mining boom. So,
yeah, absolutely. So the challenge, or my journey, was sort of one prior GFC and then one after GFC. So there's 2 different versions of me in business. And so certainly that period leading up to the global financial crisis, property market in WA in particular was very strong, early 2000s. And then obviously we had that flat period once the global financial crisis came in, where funding dried up and it was very difficult to get projects off the ground. And so that actually helped us evolve to the business that we have now in a strange way. That was a good thing for us.
Yeah.
Wasn't at the time, of course, no. But looking back now, it did help us to get to where we are now.
Yeah, I can see the grey hairs.
Absolutely.
Back on Attergy, I think what you're doing there, the services you provide are brilliant. Is exactly what small businesses need in particular. As I like to say, it's my belief that people are the hardest thing in small business, and it's where the value's at, because you can't do it on your own. And a lot of business owners, I think, don't invest enough time or training themselves to become better managers, recruiters, and leaders within their business.
Yeah, totally. So I 100% couldn't agree with you more. I think my whole method, strategy, my framework of how I help people is one based around personal leadership first, really understanding how to lead yourself before you can start thinking about leading a team. Once you've understood where you sit with it all in, and of course that evolves and changes, and that's one of the challenges that we face the most with helping business owners, is who they were when they first started the business needs to evolve, and often, it's one of the biggest challenges that the business outgrows who they've become. So that's the work to help people understand that and get connected with that. Before you can start understanding other people and how to lead them, you really need to understand yourself at a deeper level, is my belief, and the basis of what I help people evolve, because that's what exactly my journey and what happened to me. So I can relate to it, very familiar with it, and also then did the science study behind what's actually going on in our head to figure out why this stuff happens, which is really cool.
And what year did you start Attergy, and how old were you then?
So my initial business, which was actually a rental video library going back in 1989 when I was 24 and a half years old, not knowing what I wanted to do. And that was just sort of, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, a business owner. So back in 89, it's hard, I don't know, Troy, if you remember the days before mobile phones and internet, but...
Can I tell you a story? My daughter was bitching and moaning to me the other week. She couldn't find something to watch on Netflix or Disney. And I said, for Christ's sake, Maggie, when I was a boy, that's a very common phrase in my household.
When I was a lad.
I used to have to get on my BMX, because I grew up in a country town, about 10,000 people, but we lived just in the outskirts of town a little bit. Get on my BMX, ride to the video store, spend an hour choosing a video, paying for it, riding my bike back. Sometimes the tape wouldn't work. Sometimes it was the wrong tape. So don't complain to me that you can't find something on the internet.
Yeah, so I cut my teeth very early in that business. We ended up with three locations, and it was, it was a great business back then. It was a source of home entertainment. So and particularly if you're in the right socioeconomic areas, that they were pretty good money spinner businesses.
Yeah.
So I started in '89. The actual coaching business that I'm working now is really off the back of the experience that I've built throughout my business career. As I said, I've still got a real estate company which takes a bit of my time, and I'm focused on that as well. But the working with other business owners, really, it sort of unofficially started about 5 years ago, and then probably 4 years ago, where I decided that I wanted to, see where we'll go and how I can help people. And so now I'm in my 4th year of actually coaching one-on-one and some other different programs that I'm involved in.
Yep.
And that's probably, I see the next 10 years of my efforts are going to be centered around that more so.
Yeah, great. And out of interest, how long did you have the video store? When did you get out?
96. So for about 7 or 8 years.
Yep.
And the last 3 years, I'd already evolved into other business, and I had a partner that kept them going. But the writing was on the wall. Did the classic mistake is that when the businesses were at the peak and could have sold out for good dough, didn't, because this is a good money spinner. And then before we know it, with the technology and all the rest of it, they become less valuable. And then it got a case of, well, no point selling now. And then in the end, they ended up all closing. We managed to think. So that wasn't one of my best decisions, to be fair, but I learned a lot out of it. And as I said, it really, as a young guy, 25, 26, 27 in those early years, it really got me thinking about customer service, how to help a customer, build relationships. And I was sort of innately pretty good at that, but didn't really have I never went to school, business school or university, that sort of stuff. So I didn't come out with any degree ready to go into that type of business. But it really set a great foundation for how to provide a value proposition and meet the customer expectation.
Yep. I love that story. Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix in the mid-2000s.
It was a bad idea.
A very old school board said, no, we make 13% of our profits or revenues from late fees. Why would we want to change the model? It's not going to stick around. So no, we'll pass on that. Within 5 or 6 years, Blockbuster obviously went under. Yeah. There's one.
A bit like the car story, it'll never catch on.
Yeah, that's right. Henry Ford. There's one Blockbuster store left in the world. It's more of a tourist destination. It's in Bend, Oregon, in the US. Yeah,
it's a monument.
Yeah. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
Yeah, I think certainly with the growth of the real estate company, and my story, my journey was not dissimilar to a lot of business owners who, when they're developing and growing a business, they sort of reach a plateau and not really understand what that is. And so I did that as well, like in our real estate company, and potentially other factors in the life. Reach a certain level, you're making okay money, you're trying to get a little bit conservative. And what I understand now about all my human behaviour work and understand is that really they're just limiting beliefs that hold you in a place.
Yep.
But we got to a point in the real estate company probably about 8 years ago now, where it was like, well, why have we got this glass ceiling on it? And when we did some deep dive into it, it was really about us not wanting to grow or feeling comfortable, as opposed to having the courage to push forward to where it could be. So, without getting specifics on numbers, we went from about $500,000 turnover through to, triple that over a period of 4 to 5 years, purely through lifting the lid a little bit and discovering who we needed to be along the way, and grew a team around that.
Yeah.
So even in that business, so there's only 7 people in there. But the other part of I'd like to mention around that is sort of, which may help some people out there, is that growth necessary isn't just about, more numbers doing more. It's about what's the gap between what are you doing with the money you're getting and how you're getting more efficiencies. So what I found also is that once we got to a certain critical level, the exponential growth in the profit started to change, because and that was a big lesson for any other entrepreneurs out there, is that growth is not scalable. The business is not necessarily just to get more revenue in the front door. It's about when you get to a certain level, your base costs start to flatten out a little bit.
Yep.
And your profitability. And then, so for instance, the first 500, you might make profit at a certain level. The next $500,000, your profit is higher. The next 500 and higher again. Put whatever metric you want in 1 million, 2 million, 5 million. And it's about managing those efficiencies. The other part of the growth numbers for me is that my involvement now in the business is the lowest it's ever been, and yet we're turning over the most and making the highest profit.
Yep.
So that to me is real growth, because it's allowed me to do other things in my life.
That's great. That's terrific. And at Attergy, is it just yourself coaching, or you got some?
I've got an assistant that works with me 3 days a week, just to sort of help on the marketing in the background and all the things that need to happen. Yeah.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a hard one to pin a day or a time. But I think thinking about this question for me is like getting comfortable that now things are stable. Getting out of that valley, up to the peak, down to the valley, up to the peak, down to the valley. And certainly real estate, you can be, like outside influences can impact that dramatically, what's going on in the market. So for me, probably success, I'm not sure exactly what, success word is. It's different for everybody, but it's more a case of, when I got to a place where, okay, I'm comfortable now, things are stable, that even if things don't work out in the next 6 months or 12, we'll be okay. We've got other things going. We've got property development going on the other side. We're making money outside the cash flow of this business. That will hold us a good stead. So I think for me, that was the time and that was 8 years ago.
Yeah, great. Well, that was the next question. What does success look like to you?
Yeah, it's evolved. Troy, again, I'm a pretty deep thinker. I think what I've learned is that what success means to you when you're 25 is different to 35, different to 45, and certainly different to 55 if you want to take that span. But right for me, and what I'm doing, and the reason I'm going back to help other business owners, because it gives me fulfillment. So being a professional coach, I've thought about this question. And for me, it's a nice little phrase called, fulfillment aligned with my soul. So it's what I'm actually happy doing. And when I do that, I know that I get in a state of flow, and I usually make money.
I like that. That's great. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Again, another great question. I think it's knowing your client, right? Being very clear and specific about who it is you're serving. I think we spin the wheels a lot when we first start businesses, trying to be everything to everybody, thinking that, and you've got to do it because you've got to survive and you've got to make money, right? So the first 2 years is all about survival. But once you get past that level, it's really, I still find these mature businesses, 10, 15-year-old businesses, are not really clear about who they're serving and what they're, the way I look at that is productivity starts with client selection. So if you want to make money, it's really about making sure what you've got to offer is really niche market. And, we talk about niche markets, having a pointy end of who you're serving. So I think, from a marketing perspective, really get clear about who it is that you're trying to serve. And then once you've worked that out, you can then focus on how to serve it better.
Yep.
And get narrow on that. So that would be my tip on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of business owners, I certainly made the mistake early on, trying to be all things to all people, jack of all trades, master of none, and took years to get onto that concept of, own a niche or really niche down. And then it makes all the difference. Your communication and marketing is a lot sharper because it's talking to that perfect client or customer. And you get efficiencies, as you said, about doing, working in a particular niche rather than just spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, agreed with that.
And how did you fund your businesses?
Yeah, we're pretty much really just self-funded,
Yep.
not raising any capital, bringing too many. I mean, interesting. The property development side of the business is syndicated, so we pull syndicates together and we use people's super fund money and their own personal money to put into development, set up single-purpose vehicles that then create a development, return a profit, and that sort of thing. So that's different, but the internal running of all the businesses are really started off from own cash and bootstrap basically.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yeah, well, certainly the real estate industry, and now probably one of the biggest industries on the planet is coaching.
Yep.
It's certainly evolving. So yeah, I would have no problems. And real estate has been, well, great for me, and it's a really good business in that you don't have to go chasing money generally. The way the system works is that when you sell or you do some sort of deal, the money comes in the door the day that happens, and there's no debtors. You don't have to go chasing a lot of money. And you don't have to have stock that you own. So from a model perspective, real estate structure is very good that way, providing that you get the strategy right.
Yeah. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah, I think probably touch on something I said before is getting to that stability. So that's stressful, right? So when you don't have continuity in what you're doing and you're always suspect of the ebbs and flows of the markets that you're in. And so this talks very naturally to how I'm helping people about, working on your internal operating system. And when you get a stability around that, you're able to be more resilient to the outside factors. But certainly the most stressful point is when you don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 4, 6 months.
Yep.
And a lot of business owners grow enterprises based on a very short term sort of what's happening in the next 1 to 3 months, and they don't think past that. So for me is that when I took that more longer view and started thinking more about the business in a 2 to 3 year span, once I got into that groove, the stress started to go because it flattened out all the ebbs and flows a bit. So I think, that for me, that was a determining factor.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
This one I actually talked to a lot of coaching clients around, and that is, what business are you actually in? We often think we might be in an industry or a business, i.e. real estate, right? You're in the real estate business, you're in the business of selling property, but so I get people to ask themselves that question 4 times and they're not allowed to answer it the same way. Mm-hmm. And usually by the time they get to the 4th one, they've got a completely different complexion what their business is about. And what happens is you shift from being you-centric to customer-centric when you start what is actually your business. So for me, shifting from, because clients don't really care whether you make money or not. They care about what's the value proposition. And when you actually shift your focus in the business to understanding that you're there to serve and make someone else's life better, that's a big shift. And so for me, that was the area that once I worked that out, and it took a while to work that out and started implementing in, small things, big things, it really made a huge impact. And that's where we got that exponential growth, was pretty much through that change of mindset and attitude towards the business is not there to serve you. The business is there to serve whoever it is your customer and client is. And also, although that sounds like it's common sense,
it's not common practice.
That common.
No, it's not common practice. What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
I think so. Now I have developed to become a very narrow focus, sort of focus on the 3 things that you can control. I think when you're in a fast-paced growing business, there's lots of balls in the air, there's lots of things. And so that in itself creates stress in that you spend a lot of time spinning the wheels trying to fix 5 problems at once. And I think the thing that I've enjoyed the least is that struggling to be able to just narrow down the focus. And again, I learned this from Jim Collins, great author, about, if you've got any more than 3 priorities, you don't have any priorities.
Yep.
And so business's focus is about prioritizing what you need to be doing at the stage of business that you're at.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I think the vibrancy that it creates. I'm a good problem solver, and I think most entrepreneurs are at the heart, is that's what they're good at doing. And if they're not, they won't survive. And I think, understanding also that the obstacles in the pathway, the obstacles are part of the pathway. They're not necessarily things to be avoided. And so the vibrancy that it creates around that, when you've got new things happening all the time, is the bit that I really enjoyed about growing fast-paced businesses, and now helping other people who are in that state to actually understand that the challenges and the obstacles are actually part of the pathway, not to be avoided.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of my favorite Henry Ford quotes. Obstacles are those things you see when you take your eyes off your goals.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't have put it better myself.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Yeah, this one is very much one of internal growth. Like, who do you need to become as your business evolves? I think where I've seen a lot of business owners struggle, even now, and the ones that I'm coaching, is that who they were when they, let's use metric of income, 0 to 500,000 turnover is, then when you go from 500 to 1 million, you need to be someone different. And then when it grows again, you need to be different again. Yep. So the mind shift is that, who do you need to become, moving away from the delivery of the product service, becoming operational, becoming more strategic, and becoming more of a leader of the business. And so that's the biggest mind shift. Not only I have to make and still continue to make, by the way. I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think it stops. But business owners that are plateaued or stuck or can't break through balance, that's generally what it is they haven't shifted to who they need to become within the business to be able to take it to whatever the next level is, or the scale they're trying to get to.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Self-awareness. I think self-awareness is the number one skill in business. When you understand yourself internally, and then, so there's 2 parts of self-awareness. There's internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. Internal is about working out yourself. What is it that you're doing that's creating the results that you're getting or potentially not getting? And then external self-awareness is how you impact, how the people around you looking at you as the leader of an organization, becoming aware of that, and so that you can adapt accordingly. And what I can guarantee most people listening is that what you think the experience of other people is generally not what their experience is of you. And becoming self-aware of that helps you to evolve as the person you need to become within the business as it grows.
Yeah. Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success. Then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? I'm assuming, you said before we hit record, you're 33 years in business now. Well, that's 1989. I've had adequate coffee today. Work that out. So you would have hired and let go a shitload of people, I'm assuming.
Yep. So the lesson is to move away from hiring for skill and ability and move towards the character of the person. So the answer is value alignment. So if you've got certain values that you're instilling in your business, you need to bring people in that are aligned on a value system basis, I believe. And one of the key questions to ask people is, you tell us what your 5 key values are, and see if there's commonalities between who you are and what they are. And it's not a question I often get asked.
No.
But it's one that when I stop to think about, most people don't, have to stop and think. Like if I even said to you now, I mean, you might be different, Troy, but most people, if you stop and say, well, tell me what your 5 top key values are, they'll go, oh, I don't know, I have to think about it, right? And when they think about it, they'll throw up, honesty, integrity, all the general ones. Here's the tricky question, right? Tell me the criteria to what you think honesty is. So, right. So, because what I've learned from my studies around this is that there's a lot of commonalities in values, but there's a lot of difference in the criteria people place on those values.
Yep, got it.
So when you ask someone what your value is and they say, well, helping people, what's the criteria of that for you? And I think it's when you match up the criteria to the same values, you now got someone that's well aligned with who you are and where you're going. Now you've got a good human working in your organization. I think that to me is so. And then when you express your values to your team and your vision and you get them in behind it, they'll help you get to where it is you want to go.
Yep.
And the other thing is you might probably want to avoid psychopaths. And there's one in 5 people in the planet of 5.
Is it that much?
Yeah.
I've had a couple of ex-girlfriends.
Spectrum.
Yeah, right. I've had a couple of ex-girlfriends, I'm sure, were psychopaths, as they would have said about me. Probably 1 in 3 ex-girlfriends would have said the same thing about me. I didn't know the number was that high, 20%. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying, sorry about, I'm not talking about serial killers. I'm talking about people who have no empathy, because the difference between a psychopathic tendency and what it does, we've got empaths who know and understand empathy. And then there's the other spectrum, there's 20% that have low empathy, and they're the ones that, because they see people as an object to their needs, they're not good team members or good.
Got it. Yep. So
that's the, so you want to, that would be a good lesson for any business leader out there, is spend an hour and go and read up about the criteria around that.
Yep.
And then you'll probably realize that maybe 15 and 20% of your people that are working in your organization fall into that category and are probably causing the biggest disruption.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen that in teams. It's not just cultural fit, but it's communication. And so for some people, that can be coached out of them, or they can be improved to communicate better with other people once they've got some awareness of, when you do this, the impact on your behavior and therefore your performance, because you're getting less out of your team members because you're coming across as an arsehole. Yeah. People with education, people can change professionally to make the whole workplace much more productive.
Well, one of the traits of a good psychopath is they're very manipulative as well, so they can figure all that shit out to
maybe my 9-year-old daughter's a psychopath. She's very manipulative. I'm going to go read up on this.
It might be a good hour well spent, right?
Well, I'm now just thinking I might have to edit this out because my ex does listen to this podcast sometimes.
Like I was saying, don't worry about psychopaths.
Yeah. And what are some things you'd recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Yeah. So it sort of ties in with that values, but I think, so self-determination theory is 3 things that people need to thrive. And one of them is the sense of belonging. So from building a culture, you want to create a safe environment, number 1, because that's our primal driver. You need to keep safe in everything we're doing. And then number 2 is to provide an environment to belong. And the way that is create a culture where it's safe to be able to put your hand up and say, I think there's a problem here.
Yep.
And that person isn't going to get, lambasted or be put in, because as soon as you're in a culture where it's not a good idea to put your hand up and you get whacked over the head with it, people retract. And then they don't feel like they belong because they're not contributing to the greater good or the vision of the organisation. So the fastest way to lose good people is create an environment where they don't belong.
Yep.
If you create an environment that they feel like they belong, and by the way, the people that are misaligned values with you, over a period of time, they most likely will self-select because they don't feel they belong, because the values are misalignment. But if they're a narcissist or they're on a psychopathic thing, they'll use that to their advantage to stay and undermine everybody else, because that's one of their favorite pastimes.
Yep. Wow. Yeah. Also dated a narcissist. And well, she called us that first. I didn't say that until she'd said it, but
that's a popular word now.
I know, but she was quite analytical, and she did a lot of reading up on it and psychopaths, and listening to a lot of podcasts, and she loves those criminal podcasts, etc. as well. So, jeez. Yeah, so it's huge, the culture, if you can get that right. But yeah, this human behavior and the psyche is very, very powerful, particularly in the workplace. If people can understand that, and emotional intelligence, obviously, as well. There's a dearth of material out in the last few decades on this. So yeah, I do encourage business owners to chuck that on their reading list and become a bit more aware of it, for sure. And we'll get to some books in a moment.
The scary part is that if you're the leader and you figure out that, shit, I'm the psychopath.
I'm a psychopathic narcissist. What do you do about it?
No wonder nobody hangs around.
Yeah, that's it. And tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most difficult questions to answer for most entrepreneurs.
Yep.
So again, my take on all this and how this is one of the areas that I actually help people evolve, and particularly larger organisations where you've got people that one of the biggest problems, I don't have enough time in the day, and so potentially working somewhere between 50 to 80 hours a week in a business trying to drive it. That's okay for some time, but then there comes a time where that's not sustainable.
You know what? Sorry, can I just say, when people say that to me, I don't have enough time in the day, I say bullshit. We've each got 24 hours in the day, 168 hours in the week, the same amount of time. It's what you choose to prioritize and fit into the 8-hour day or whatever it is. Sorry.
I said to a guy yesterday that you've got the same amount of time as Richard Branson has in the day.
Yeah, that's it. That's right.
So 24, we don't get any more, we don't get any less.
No, that's right.
And that comes down to a focus question. So that's another conversation about if the first red flag is that if you haven't got enough time in the day, it means that you're focusing on the wrong thing in your business and you've potentially grown bigger than what you are. And then you need to figure out how you're going to evolve to who you need to become in that organisation.
Yep.
But the other thing about work-life balance is your identity gets tied to the biggest arena of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest arena of your life when you're growing an enterprise is your business. There's nothing else that you spend 70, 80 hours a week thinking about, working in, driving down the highway, ruminating about whatever, fixing problems, than working your business. So the trap is that you tie your identity to the business, and more, and even deeper than that, you tie your identity to the outcomes of that business.
Yep.
Right? So whether it's going well or going good, so your self-worth and who you think you are. Okay, everything's going great, so I'm a good person. As soon as things go bad, you go, I'm not such a great person because I failed at this. And this becomes your identity. So the challenge, I think the work is firstly to move that identity away from the outcomes more to who do you need to be, what's the character of you, and be consistent, and your outcomes will change and you get less attached to the outcomes. The other thing is just having things outside of your business that occupy part of your world, i.e., potentially hobbies or other things, or, family, friends, social, whatever it may be, sporting clubs, all those things are good to help get that balance. Not because you need to have a diary to say, well, I'm going to spend 3 hours there, 2 hours there, 4 hours there to balance it. I don't think really there is no balance really. At the end of the day, as I said, what else do you spend in your life where you're focusing so much time? So it just doesn't happen unless you evolve to a place where you've got a business that you only need 5 or 10 hours a week involvement and you've got plenty of time to do other stuff. So that's a way to get balance, I think.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself over the 33 years?
I've never done the calculation, but I'm tipping that's a lot of money.
Yep.
So again, go back to my story about pre-GFC and after. So probably pre-GFC, very little, because I didn't, I was in a place where my 30s where I didn't think I needed it because I knew what I was doing, where I was going, making money.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have a bit of a hiccup and then you come out of the side, you start looking for answers. And for my journey is one of, the more I started to figure some stuff out, the more I got, really into it and started going deeper because I started getting good results out of it. And understanding human behavior and who we need to be has been huge. So yeah, I've got 2 coaches at the moment. I've got what I call a psychological coach who helps me understand more about how to understand people, and then I've got a development coach in the business. And then I don't get in the car and drive to get the milk without having a podcast on of some description.
Yep.
So I think that's one of your questions coming up about that. But I read now. I never used to be a reader, but now I've either got an audio book going when I'm walking the dog, or when at night I'll read half an hour on another book. I don't read fiction. I only read non-fiction stuff that interests me, certainly around all these subjects we're talking about in business development. So like we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know how much, but a lot.
And you've mentioned. Sorry again. You've mentioned coaches. Have you had mentors along the way?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's always, it's an interesting distinction between mentors and coach. And I suppose certainly in the real estate company, because we were dealing with a lot of commercial property, and I was dealing with a lot of high net worth people doing developments and buying and selling, $1 million properties. It always fascinated me. I'm a curious person by nature. So I'd always ask the people I was dealing with when I got to know is, what was it about that got you to yes? I was very curious about understanding the distinction between what made a successful person making money doing this stuff versus the person that struggles. So I think probably not necessarily by design, but by default, a lot of my clients have become mentors to me along the way in this, because I was often working with them for 3, 6, 12 months, depending what the project was. And you get to learn a lot from, mindset, what their strategy is, what worries them, what doesn't worry them. And so, and when I started in real estate, I had a couple of people around me that were sort of telling me, what makes a difference. And then it's up to you to then pick up all that and work within things. So, I think you need mentors along the way, and you should go seeking them out because they're not going to seek you out.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
Not an official capacity, but I've got 2 or 3 go-to people that I call thrash things out.
Yep.
I would say not in an official capacity, but unofficially, yeah.
You're one of the few we've had on that has exited a business. You got any advice for the audience, those that are thinking of exiting or may be looking at that in a few years' time?
Yeah, I have actually. You might be surprised. Something that I've actually thought a lot about recently, I'm helping other business owners figure this part out, is to look at your business, no matter whether it's a small business or a long business, on a 50-year span. Right? So that sounds like a big horizon, but not from the point of view that you need to have a 50-year plan or a strategy. But think about it that the business that you're in at the moment, you're the custodian of it for this period or time. You're the owner, you're one that makes a profit or makes the loss. But if you start thinking about your business on a 50-year horizon, that someone may buy it off you, they might acquire off you, whatever it may be, buy you out, you start to make decisions that are a bit more long-term. And I think every business that I've studied, that the ones that have been successful, whatever measure you want to put on that, is because they had a long-term view of where they were going. Right? So short-term view businesses tend to be short-term. So it's a bit of a coaching sort of strategy to get people to understand is that all these ups and downs that you're having, it's just while you're the custodian of this business. So think of your business from an exit strategy that someone's going to buy it and take it to even a bigger level than what you have in the next 20 or 30 years after you well and truly exit it. And when you take that out, it also helps you define your purpose, your vision. It helps you create a business that you're not going to be the key person in it all the time. And there's nothing downside that comes from having that mindset and that attitude. So that would be the thing that I would say helps people get perspective around this.
Great. All right, Torrin, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing growing a small business?
Yeah, easy answer, evolving yourself, right? So that the business doesn't outgrow who you have become.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Yeah, lots. So this one here, any books that are written by Seth Godin or Jim Collins, you should take the time to read. Mm-hmm. They're geniuses. And they've spent a lot of time figuring stuff out that we don't have the time to do. I think if you haven't read a book yet and you want to start somewhere, start with The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yep.
Great. One that probably may not be on everybody's radar is one called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winner. He talks about how we use our brain to figure stuff out. Mm-hmm. And it's not a heavy science book, but it's a really good one that you can put into practicality as a business owner.
Just adding that to my list now. What was the author's name, sorry?
Daniel Kahneman, so it's Kahnerman, and the book's called Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right, I'm going to add that one too. Not that I don't already have enough on my Audible list, but that's one of the traps of doing these podcasts. I get so many new books I need to want to listen to. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Yeah, so I think podcast is one of the underrated resources on the planet at the moment.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, whatever it was, I came across Tim Ferriss. The 4-Hour Work Week book was pivotal in some stuff that I'm doing now and shifted my thinking a lot. But then I started listening to his podcast because he interviews the high performers on the planet. But here's the takeaways, like whatever podcast you listen to, if you find someone that resonates with where you're at in your journey, jump onto the podcast platform, type in that person's name, And maybe there'll be 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 interviews they've done.
Yep.
Studying those interviews and listening to what those high performance people on the planet have done is an education in itself.
Yep.
Right.
Definitely.
So the key is listen to stuff. Tim Ferriss is a good resource because he's only talking to the top 1 or 2% in their field on the planet. So that's not a bad place to start. So I would use that resource more.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
A priority matrix. So get clear about how you're spending your day. Are you in dollar productive mode or are you not in dollar productive mode? And so there's lots of different quadrants out there, but if you look at there's a priority matrix quadrants that I use, which is important, not important, urgent, and not urgent.
Is that from Covey 7?
Yeah. So Michael Gerber.
In E-Myth.
Yeah, E-Myth. And then sort of there's been a lot of adaptations from that. But it's a really good way to work out where you're spending all your time in the day. And then when you understand yourself at a deeper level, you find you're pushing yourself to the comfort zone, which is urgent but not important.
Yep.
So the one takeaway around that is, guys, anybody's listening out there, if you do something that's not important really, really, really well, it doesn't make it important.
No.
Right? It doesn't shift it from not important to important. But people get stuck a lot of their day in doing stuff that's not important.
Yep.
And so this priority matrix is a great tool to really get yourself on the right track of being focused on what you need to be focused on.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 33 years ago?
Be patient, be consistent, sacrifice the short term for the long-term benefit. I think consistency in anything you do in business is key. Like, chopping and changing and moving your strategy all the time is not a good idea. So I would say, and then be patient, right? Because it takes time for things to evolve. People want to do something on Monday and get a result on Friday. Doesn't quite always work out. You need a longer term strategy. And one of the ways I teach people or help people is that whatever you do in the next 1 to 3 months will show up in 6 to 9 months. You just need to be consistent with what you're doing in the 1 to 3 months all the time, and it starts to show up.
I've got here on my desk one of my favorite quotes. The secret of success is constancy of purpose. Benjamin Disraeli, one of the ex-British prime ministers.
Yep, cool.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Torrin. I think everyone will get a lot of value out of what you shared with us. Colourful journey of 33 years in business, from video stores to real estate to now coaching. And sounds like you've had a lot of fun and really enjoying what you're focusing on now. And I really appreciate your time. Excellent. Appreciate it, Troy. Love the opportunity, mate. Thanks for that. And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.